Wonderful, wonderful day. This Monday, amen. We're into the month of March. But I tell you, I was so excited about our organization, our community activist group, Unity for Success. We call it US, an acronym for Unity for Success. This past weekend, amen, we had our When We Were Kings and Queens event. And I tell you, what an occasion. Amen. If you missed it, you missed the opportunity to honor and salute kings and queens of Blytheville, Arkansas, and Mississippi County, and the movement of the 1970s, the Black Power movement. Amen. So much was done, so much was sacrificed for their children and their children's to have opportunities, education, and the opportunity to have livable wage jobs. So we were so proud to honor honorees and honorary mentions. So many to name today, but just standing out right now, definitely my godmother, Joyce Cooper Hunter, amen, Mrs. Sandra King, and Mrs. Sue Jeffers, and amen, we had so many there, Dr. Abraham, and amen, it just truly blessed our spirit to have these women of God, Brother Albert Beasley out of Osceola, Pastor Johnny Williams, and so many others that were recognized on that great day. We mentioned some of our young heroes and sheroes, amen. Dr. Martin there with the Delta Gateway Museum, and Brother Tony Hollis being one of the only few powerful activists we have left on the north end of Mississippi County. Amen. But I'm excited today to get into some commentary and some dialogue that came and stemmed from this weekend of activities, of communicating with our community and with our constituents, making sure we inform about the importance of this moment, the importance of this election cycle as we prepare to ease into right now. We're getting ready for the primary, which will be tomorrow, election day. Then we move on into the midterms, understanding the importance of being informed, understanding the issues, understanding that the Republican Party has become well at using certain words that sound safe, that sounds educational, that sounds like inclusion, but they're really code words to do exactly the opposite. We talked about what the SAVE Act can do to this community and marginalized community. We've talked about how they're trying to reform justice reform and how creating a third body that will make a decisions in terms of punishment and sentencing for children in rural communities. And now let's talk about the LEARN Act. Even though this has already been improved, one of the biggest problems we have across this country, especially in marginalized, poor, rural communities and urban communities, is getting information, getting a clear understanding on what the policies are, what the proposed policies are, what these acts are. Usually, again, they use fancy words to convince us this is going to help people. But what we find out most often when these policy proposals come up from the Republican Party, it's really about isolating, make it more difficult to receive access and services for impoverished rural and especially urban communities to even compete. So even right here in Mississippi County, Arkansas, one of the things I've been hearing as we're campaigning for state representative as a proud Democrat, I'm really hearing Democrats, men and women, share from their perspective, and who am I to say their perspective is wrong? But I've had two or three prominent people tell me that they supported Republican State Representative Carr because he cared about the students and education and what he did with the SAFE Act to help our kids. But they truly didn't understand the SAFE Act. They didn't have a informed view of the total impact, good and bad, that this has on poor communities. So again, we're taking their word on They're working for us and trying to make things better, where the truth is they're supporting the Trumpism Republican policy that's hell bent on making things more difficult for the poor and the working class, and making things more accessible and profitable for the rich and the one percenters. So when we get to talking about the Arkansas Learn Act, SB 294, passed, but many voters wondered if the state representative fully explained its consequences, the consequences of the Learn Act. Did your Republican state representative take the time to explain how this act could harm public education? Did they speak about the harm that the SAFE Act can do to public education, especially in rural and low-income areas? Or did they just expect you to take their word without any questions? Often we see our Republican representatives and our representatives coming to events and shaking hands and taking pictures, just a photo op, and giving you push button words to make you think they're fighting for you. But when you look at in depth to what's written into these proposed policies and acts, is doing more colonization, taking more from the poor, and making it more difficult for us to receive services that really should be a privilege. Did they explain that to you? We have to expect more out of our state representatives. Again, just showing up to events for photo ops and handshakes, that is not the work. That's just a parade. I've often heard leaders that mentored me saying, many soldiers, many men and women like to dress up in their military attire and uniforms for the parade. But if you asked how many were prepared to go to war and to battle, you would find they are not as excited. We thank God for our brave men and women and soldiers across this country who dress and prepare for battle and war to protect this country each and every day. Even sometimes when it's against their personal opinions, they fight to protect this country. But we're in a time now where people are using our unity and our pride in our country and really working that against us. Misinformed, not giving accurate information, just expecting you to take their word for it. I ask, were you well informed about the Learn Act by your District 34 Republican state representative? Were you well informed? Or were you misled to think that it was good for the poor, rural and urban communities? This is why District 34 needs real leadership. Individuals like myself, Mike Middlebrook, a proud Democrat that will speak and fight for our community in Mississippi County, Arkansas. I plan to break down in this commentary the key concerns surrounding the LEARNS Act, highlighting its potential negative impact on Arkansas public schools, on our teachers, and on our vulnerable students. How the Learn Act diverts public funds away from public schools. Even the SAVE Act, we're talking about, all of this is about diverting public funds, government funds from the public schools and giving more funds to the private schools. So again, how will this help an impoverished community when our public school system is struggling right now? Every dollar that comes out of the public school system and goes into the private sector hurts the kids of Mississippi County, especially those from working class families, fixed income families, impoverished families, and those who are struggling day to day, who depend on the public school system. Public schools rely heavily on state fundings to operate. When funds are redirected to private schools, public schools lose money that they need for teachers, for supplies, and for programs. This is especially damaging for schools in rural or in low-income areas that already struggle with limited budgets. Even as you drive through Arkansas and you look at some of our small towns, especially Mississippi County and the Delta, and you look at the community, some of the larger towns with a high population of people of color, the school systems are suffering. Well, if you go into more rural communities, or you go further to Northeast Arkansas, you see new schools, you see innovation, you see infrastructure investment in the clean energy, in the technology, into broadband. Even the private school systems, they're popping up everywhere. And we have nothing against private schools. If you're willing to pay for your child to have a private education, that's your right. But whenever we're taking money from the public school system to fund the private school system, it don't matter what words you use to make that sound right. That's hurting poor people. That's hurting working class people. That's taking the tax dollars from the poor and passing it and redistributing it to the affluent and the rich to have their children educated with public funds in private schools. And this is happening all over the country. While we've been told that the LEARN Act is to make education better. Well, if you're taking money from the public schools and putting it into the private sector, what happens to the pay for our educators who are experienced and qualified and who have been working with the public school systems? Most of the most qualified are pulled away from the public school system and led to the private school system because we find they have more funding than the public school systems. Changes to teachers' pay and job security. The LEARN Act removed the requirement for school districts to follow a state-mandated salary schedule based on experience and education. This change could lead to inconsistent pay across the district and less recognition of teachers with years of service and advanced degrees. Because again, you find there's more funding for the private school system than there is for the public school systems. Additionally, the act repeals the Teachers' Fair Dismissal Act. This repeal raises concerns about job security for teachers. Without these protections, teachers might face unfair dismissal, which could hurt morale and make it harder to attract and keep qualified, high-quality teachers and educators. Again, they're saying the LEARN Act, they're saying it's to improve, but it's really making the public school system more inefficient, more difficult to draw experienced, qualified teachers, and moving more to the private sector. So again, how is the SAVE or the LEARN Act helping the average citizen in Mississippi County? Your state representative proudly, your Republican state representative, proudly signed on to this legislation and convinced us that it was best for us, even after having a tenured career in the public school system. His livelihood, his career was based on supporting the public school system. But now that he's moved into politics, he's more about the private school system. How is that serving you better? We're going to have to learn to ask the right questions. The impact on vulnerable students, as we come to a close here, we're about 15 minutes in. Give me about 5 more minutes. The impact on vulnerable students. Private schools receiving public vouchers are not required to admit all students. Again, they're going to take public funds, give it to the private schools and vouchers, and they can pick and choose which students can go. Just think about that. So really, you're telling some students to come to the private school if you don't want to be in the public school with the general population, and we will use public funds to pay for your education. And then you're going to tell some of our children from poor communities and backgrounds, you can't come to the private school, even though public funds are being used to pay for it. How is that better for Mississippi County? It's personal. Again, this means that they can choose which students to accept, often leaving students with high needs or disabilities behind in the public school systems. Most of these private school systems don't want kids with special needs. They don't want kids who need special attention. They don't want kids who need the type of motivation that's required from highly qualified teachers with empathy and love that take the patience to teach and keep the attention span of our children. They don't want them. Think about this. Think about what the Republican Party has told you in the last couple of years. All these things they're doing to make it better for everybody, were they really trying to make it better for a few? In using the tax base and the funds off the backs of poor people to make this happening while convincing us. And again, we have some Democrats, for whatever reason, not understanding, personal gain, just going along, that are convincing other Democrats that what the Republican Party is doing through its surrogates, its advocates, and its representatives, spreading a little money around, a little misinformation, keep us bickering with each other over personal issues rather than policies, that are slowly moving us back to a segregated type educational system. It will be separate and unequal, not separate and equal, separate and unequal. When you're taking public funds to fund a private school system, deflecting and removing kids that you want from the public school system to bolster up the private sector, how is that helping Mississippi County? The Learn Act also mandates retentions for third graders who cannot read at grade level. While reading proficiencies are important, this policy could negatively affect students with dyslexia, with attention span problems, problems pronouncing words. All of these issues as a child, I struggled with, and I take no shame with that. I've had challenges with education, challenges staying focused. In fact, most children from an impoverished area, from the Delta, have some struggles, which is why we should be investing more money into the public school systems, not less money. They're holding our students back and harming our students, taking away from the confidence of the students and the teachers by taking as much public funding from the public schools as they can and redirecting it to voucher programs for private schools. And we're sitting idly by because it says Learn Act, because it says Save Act, because it says Juvenile Justice Reform Act. We're supposed to believe this is about helping poor children with special needs, people of color, from rural farming, poor communities, and nothing could be further from the truth. We need representation that will have public forums, not just on Main Street or just at the chamber or just at the country club or just at the Kiwanis Club, but will strategically look for other locations to hold public forums and meetings so all citizens, regardless of their economic status, regardless of your living location, will have access to the same information so you can make informed decisions. Even now, we're scheduling town hall meetings at our Blythesville public school system starting in March, and we're going to be setting up meetings in Osceola, in Joyner, and other ends of the county so we can get the message out. And we look forward to hearing from the constituents to ask questions, dig deeper into policy. Don't take the push button labels they apply to things to make it seem like it's about making it better. Well, they're really trying to create separation and inclusion. They're really trying to defund public schools rather than fund public schools. And I stand on that anyway. They may give us a crumb or two here or there, but the just cause here is to justify taking money out the public school systems and giving more money to the private school sector. There are also legal concerns and lack of accountability. The voucher program faces lawsuits claiming it violates the Arkansas Constitution, which requires the states to maintain a free, efficient, and public school system. They're putting more interest in the private sector of education than they are into the public sector of education. That alone should tell you that the Republican Party does not care about the poor, the marginalized, and the needs of our children. When you're prioritizing the private sector over the public sector. Moreover, private schools receive vouchers and are not subject to the same transparency and accountability rules as public schools. Think about that. Private schools have less restrictions and lack transparency because they're private. They don't have to share anything with you, but they're asking for public funds from public taxpayers. Whereas the public schools have to account for every dollar down to crayons and pencils and glue. And in fact, in Blythesville, the public school system has been taken over. While we were busy on personal issues and grievances, fighting each other, they were strategically preparing to take over the Blythesville school system. Even yesterday in our local paper, we're seeing rural schools apply for grants and fundings for millions of dollars. And we're struggling to even keep a charter. We don't even have a school board. Our public school system is being managed by an out-of-state company that's given the right to make all financial decisions of any substantial means. And this happened under our watch as the Republican Party quietly took over tried to take over every elected position, from the PTA to the school board to quorum court, city council, state level, and federal level. And here we are arguing with each other, allowing personalities to get in the way. Our children are losing, our seniors are losing, our veterans are losing, our disabled are losing, and we're still scared to get in the fight as we come to a close. This is the moment. This is the time where you just can't say you about it. You got to be about your people. You got to put personal grievances aside. You got to do what's best for the greater good. If we cannot push this Trumpism Republican train back, if we cannot change the direction they're pushing us towards, our public school system will suffer greatly. Our children will suffer greatly for generations. I believe wholeheartedly that any act or policy that's voted and approved can be reversed. When there's harm done to a community and you elect representation that's willing to stand, speak for you, fight for you, we can reverse the course. We can push back even on the Learns Act, because it's not about your children. It's not about the working class. It's not about the marginalized. It's not about the poor. It's not about the migrant worker. It's not even about the farmer. It's about the rich that wants to be able to send their children to private schools on public funds. What's required here? When you see your Republican state representative, ask his positions on issues. Ask, do he support the Trumpism policies that are coming down from the federal level? And then you have to understand that all politics are local. All politics are local. What we do on the local level reflects what they're wanting to do on the federal level. So if a person is running as a Republican, they're supporting the Republican agenda. They may do one or two little things for you, but they're doing a whole bunch of other things to hurt you. When are you going to stop settling for less? When are you going to stop expecting more out of your representation? More than just showing up at events and shaking hands and smiling and not having an answer to your questions. I may not have the answer when you ask me, but I assure you I will do the research. I will try to get back with you. If I can't get back with you in person, I will address the concern or issue through my platforms. I will share information and resources of where you can find the information. But to mislead you as an educator that the Learn Act was good for Mississippi County, Arkansas, the Delta, a community where the median income is less than $25,000 a year. And I know when you look at the internet and you get information, they say it's higher than that. And it is for some. But is it for you? God bless you. Please ask the right questions. Be informed. Your vote is your power. Please don't allow anyone to mislead you. If they're not willing to explain the policy, the act, the concept, the goods and the bad, how it affects you and your family, they don't have your best interest in heart. Have a blessed day.